I'm sure everybody here has heard of the Lion King. Is there anybody that doesn't know the story of the Lion King? One person. There's one in every crowd. I can remember when the movie came out, but my kids were too little. We've got two people. Good, you're in for a treat this morning then. When the movie came out in '94, it's an animated fiction film, and I waited till it came out on those big VHS tapes, and I went to one of those video places and rented it for my kids. Did anybody go to the theater to see it? Do you remember? We got a couple, okay. And what about going to a musical of The Lion King? Okay, we've got a few more, so it's a great story. There were people for years afterward who would say Hakuna Matata, and everybody would know what you were saying, even though it's Swahili for no worries. It was a saying that came from that movie, and many of us can remember it now. The story takes place in the Pride Lands of Africa, and the original Lion King at the beginning of the film is Mufasa, and he has his only son, Simba. He is training Simba to be a good and just and righteous leader of the Pride Lands. And so he explains to Simba about the circle of life, and he says this: yes, we eat the antelope, but when we die, our body becomes the grass, and the antelope eats the grass. And so we are all connected. Everything was going great for Mufasa and Simba until Scar, another lion, decided he wanted to be in charge. He wanted to be the Lion King. And so he killed Mufasa. And he sent Simba away from the Pride Lands. And then Scar put a bunch of hyenas in places of power, and under the leadership of Scar and the hyenas, the Pride Lands suffered. Everybody suffered. All the creatures, even the earth itself, suffered. Now, meanwhile, Simba is growing up in an oasis with some outcasts, and he's having a great time, and he's singing Hakuna Matata, no worries. They're just living life large and having a great time until the spirit of Mufasa comes and visits Simba and tells him to go back. You must go back now. You're fully grown. You're a lion. You need to go back to the Pride Lands and save your people, your lions. And so Simba returns, and he defeats Scar, and he restores order. Now, when he defeats Scar, he shows mercy. He doesn't kill him. He sends him away. He allows him to live, but he must leave. But Scar loves power. Scar cannot give up that power. And so he keeps fighting. And he fights until the hyenas that he put in places of power turn on him and kill him. Then Simba restores order to the Pride Lands. Another baby lion is born. Everybody celebrates the circle of life, and they all live happily ever after singing Hakuna Matata. And that is the book of Revelation, more or less. Okay. Now we're at the end of the book, and we're going to use the Lion King to help us understand what we're reading. And you know, if you know anything about Revelation in the last how many weeks we've been talking about it, you know that it is apocalyptic literature that must be read and appreciated and understood in its context, in its time and place, right? Tell me yes, or we're going to have to do this again next week. Okay. Just like the Lion King is animated fiction, we must appreciate it as animated fiction. That is what it is. The Lion King story did not happen. It's not going to happen in the future. And we can still learn all kinds of really good lessons from the Lion King. So the other thing we want to remember about the revelation of John is that it is highly symbolic. So we've got a couple more symbols we're going to talk about today. And it also shows us this cosmic battle of good and evil, and leaves us with this assurance that God is not going to let that go on forever, that God is going to destroy evil, and that we are all going to experience the realm of God right here on earth, where we will all be singing, according to Revelation, holy, 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 and according to the Lion King, Hakuna Matata, right? So there are two things that we have to go through in the book of Revelation before we get to the place where we can say no worries that Dawn read for us this morning. Two little things. One is the fall of Babylon, and the other is Armageddon. But don't worry, It's all going to turn out fine. Now, let's talk about Babylon and what that is. Babylon was an ancient enemy of Israel. Babylon is the archetype of evil in the Hebrew Scriptures. Babylon in 586 BCE destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the Temple of Solomon. It had been under siege for almost 3 years when they finally just destroyed the entire temple, killed many of the Israelite people, took many into captivity. They were just the most terrible, terrible enemy ever. For John, writing the book of Revelation, it's no longer Babylon that is doing those things. Now it's Rome. So every time we see the word or the name Babylon in the book of Revelation, John is talking about Rome, or any power that annihilates people to gain wealth or more power. Now, some scholars say that Babylon is actually the human condition, because we all just want more power and more wealth. And scholars warn that when a nation has a lot of power and is very prosperous, that we are tempted to become Babylon, to become Rome, to take what we want and not to care for the people that we're harming. And so this book of Revelation is a reminder that we as Christians must resist empire. We must resist our own tendency to make deals with the two beasts of military power and of economic power. And so with that in mind, we know that if Babylon is active and Rome is active, that somewhere in the Lion King there must be an archetype of evil, and that is Scar. Scar and those hyenas are the Babylon in the Lion King. And there's one thing that Scar does not count on. He does not count on the return of Simba. And in John's apocalypse, Rome also does not count on the return of Jesus. And Jesus comes back. It's in chapter 19, so if you want to read up on it on your own, it's a very short little section where Jesus returns in the book of Revelation. And he's riding a white horse. Now that's significant, because what was Jesus riding when he rode into Jerusalem in the gospel stories? A donkey, right? A donkey is a symbol of peace, but a horse is a symbol of war. So Jesus is riding in on this white horse. He's wearing robes that are covered with blood, except the battle hasn't started yet. So where does this blood come from? It is his own. It has already been shed. And it is a symbol, scholar Tim Mackey says, that there is no other blood that needs to be shed now, because blood has already been shed. Jesus has shed his own. So he is not coming back for more blood. But he is bringing a weapon. And if you read about this in chapter 19, he has a sword sticking out of his mouth. Now, unless Jesus was a professional sword swallower, I think we can safely assume that that is symbolic, right? I don't imagine that he actually had a sword sticking out of his mouth. That would make it really difficult. Now, in order to understand what the symbolism of the sword is, I want to remind you of a verse in the letter to Hebrews. It's an anonymous letter that was written to the Hebrew people about 20 years before John's apocalypse was written. And I wonder if this is common thinking among those early Christian groups. But in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12, it says, "The word is living and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. It penetrates even to dividing soul and spirit, joint and marrow. It judges the thoughts and the attitudes of the heart." The word does that. Now, when I was a young adult in evangelical church, I was taught that that meant the Bible. Any word in the Bible is living and active and must be respected. But you know what? The writer of Hebrews wrote that phrase, that sentence, before the Bible was ever put together. So that can't be what it means. It maybe means the Hebrew scriptures, because it is the letter to the Hebrews. So that makes sense. But it certainly is not the Bible that we have in mind, the one that we read now, that the letter or the author of Hebrews was talking about. It's words. The word that comes out of your mouth is a double-edged sword. One side cuts, the other side heals. And it is a great responsibility that we all bear what kind of words we speak. And the words coming out of Jesus' mouth from our gospel readings are, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love one another. Do unto others. Whenever you help the least of these, you are doing this for me. Jesus was constantly saying, love each other. And this is the word that is coming out of his mouth. Jesus is not bringing a sword to the battle. He's bringing a dictionary. He's bringing words that he can form into sentences. He's not coming for blood. He's already wearing his own. And it is the words that Jesus speaks that causes the judgment of the nations. It's interesting, if you read this little section in chapter 19 that talks about Armageddon, it goes straight from Jesus with the word to this carnage all around and birds of prey eating the flesh of those who have fallen. But it never once says that Jesus used a weapon on anybody. It never once says that any of the armies of heaven hurt anybody. Instead, those that perish are the ones who cannot love each other. Just like Scar, he could not love those around him. He only loved power, and he could not stop fighting. And it was others, the hyenas, who also could not love one another, who killed him. I like to imagine in Armageddon, if anybody is perishing, if anybody is judged, it is those who simply cannot love. Because those who cannot love one another will kill one another. And we don't need Jesus to come and show us how to do that, because we are doing a great job of it. Just ask the folks in Gaza, where people are dying every single day, men, women, and children dying from starvation, lack of medical care, just being bombed. Ask the people in Ukraine. Oh, I think we know how to kill one another. What we don't know how to do is how to love one another, and that is the sword of Jesus' mouth. That's the word that he brings us, and that's the word that will save us. We have to learn how to love one another. So imagine this vision now. John is watching all of this. He sees all of these birds eating the flesh of those who have fallen, and then all of a sudden there's a change of scenery. The next thing he sees is a new heaven and a new earth, everything made new, and a new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven. And it is unlike any Jerusalem he could have imagined, because it's missing something. The Babylonians had destroyed the temple that Solomon built. The Romans had destroyed the temple that Herod built. And in this new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, there is no temple. Instead, this new Jerusalem directs us to go back to Genesis. Because was there a temple in Genesis? No. There was no need for animal sacrifice. God was present with the humans. God was right there in the garden with humanity. And in the New Jerusalem, God is there again. And it is God's light that is shining. And the Lamb is there too. And there is no need for sacrifice, because it's already all been done. There's no need for the temple anymore. There's also a river of life that brings healing and life to all. It's like the fountain of youth coming out of the New Jerusalem. And there's a tree in this city. And it's the same tree that we find all the way back in Genesis chapter 3 at the Garden of Eden. It's the tree of life. Now, if you read that story about the garden again, you'll remember that the human beings eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? And then God says, oh no, they know too much. We need to get them out of that garden before they eat from the tree of life, because then they're going to live forever, and we can't have that. But here it is. The tree of life is back in the New Jerusalem. It is there for all of us to eat, and the leaves will bring healing. It is like the garden again, only better. And because God is present, the gates of this city are never closed. They are always open. Everyone can enter. It's a beautiful vision that reminds us that the goodness of God will prevail. Now, what do we take from this book of Revelation? After all of that, so much suffering happening in life, the four horsemen that were already present all along, this terrible battle where people cannot love one another, but only love power, this warning to all of us. What do we take from that? Maybe you'll remember with me what we've learned over the last few weeks. That John was writing to churches who were suffering. The emperor of Rome at this time was Domitian. Domitian was a narcissistic, antisocial, horrible person, sociopath, who killed people who did not agree with him. It was a terrible time for these churches to be alive. It was a terrible time for them to hold on to their faith because they never knew when it might cost them their lives. And John is writing all of this to encourage them so that they will have hope, so that their faith will be strengthened. And he tells them exactly what they must do. He tells them to imitate the Lamb. He tells them to show mercy to everyone around them, but particularly to their enemies. He tells them they are called to be the witnesses of God and to speak the words of God to a world that needs it. And he does all of that to strengthen their faith, because we know that hope is more than a wish. Hope cannot just be wishful thinking that somehow everything's going to turn out right. Hope always comes with an action, and John gives us these actions, things we can do that will strengthen our faith, that will keep hope burning, that will remind us that God is not going to let this happen forever, that even if today is difficult, that you are always loved, and there's always a place for you. And there's always a future. It just may not look the way that you want it to look. So it's not yet time to sing Hakuna Matata, right? We can sing no worries, but I'm pretty sure all God's people got worries. So right now, it's the time to do what John told the churches to do, to keep hope alive. And that is to imitate Jesus, to show mercy to others, to be the witnesses for God, so that we can strengthen our faith. So my question to you this morning is, what can you do just for you to strengthen your faith? What is it that strengthens your faith? Maybe there are things you're already doing so that you feel like your faith is strong, because, friends, you're going to need it. You need it now. What are you going to do to keep that hope alive? What are you going to tell yourself? Maybe we should end there. What are you telling yourself about the future? What words are you speaking? Are they causing you to have more faith, causing you to have hope, or are the words you speak to yourself draining your faith and draining your hope? I don't know. You'll have to answer that. Find something that you can say to yourself to remember, to remind yourself that this doesn't last forever, no matter what you're going through in your life. It doesn't last forever. But God's love does, just like that circle of life. God's love lasts. No worries. Amen.